I used to give this talk that was entitled The 9 Lessons Learned from Failure. And the theme around that, the basic idea is that one, failure is the best teacher, success a terrible teacher, right? And with each startup, not just my own, but other people's startups, there's like 2 awesome things you get from it. One is you learn something, usually. And 2 is you have awesome people that you run into that you, if you're lucky enough, you get to take them with you. If you were lucky enough and treated them well enough, and you get to take them with you along the way, they kind of like become your crew. So I feel like I have like a small crew now that I'm very grateful for.
Welcome to Brave. Learn from Southeast Asia's best tech leaders. Build the future, learn from our past, and stay human in between. No BS on success. I'm Jeremy Au, venture capitalist, serial founder, Harvard MBA, science fiction nerd, and dad of 2 daughters. Every week, we debate startup news, interview changemakers, answer listener questions, and share personal insights. Join our movement of over 40,000 members and get transcripts, resources, and community at www.bravesea.com. Stay well and stay brave.
Are you expanding or launching a business in the Philippines? Ensuring your employees' good health is key to attracting and retaining top talent. That's where Hive Health comes in, especially for startups and small to medium-sized businesses. They specialize in providing top quality and hassle-free healthcare plans tailored to your workplace. Learn more at www.ourhivehealth.com.
Hey, Sonny, really excited to have you on the show. We had such a wonderful dinner conversation at the Hustle Fund camp. I just thought that this would be an amazing journey to share. Sonny, could you share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, that was a lot of fun in Bali. And it seems like a world ago, but it's only been a few weeks. Gosh, time's flown by. Yeah, so a quick background on myself. Born in Vietnam, came to the United States as a young boy, refugee. Grew up in the Midwest, Oklahoma City, and went to University of Illinois and then MIT for university. Grad school. The plan originally was to be a professor, to be in academics, and then one thing led to another, and I ended up being in startups. And so I've just been swimming in startups for the last 25 years. Founded 5 of my own, ran a couple, invested in a bunch of others, and advised countless others. So I've just really enjoyed that world.
Amazing. Could you share a little bit about what you were like growing up as a kid?
Oh boy. When I was a little kid, I was always my brother's little sidekick. I have an older brother who's 6 years older than me. And so I was just a little kid that would tag along a lot of the time. But honestly, I think I was pretty much clueless. When I came to the US, one of the stories my friends I'm still in touch with my friends from first grade. My friend John, he said, Sonny, you used to always get mad at us because you wouldn't understand why we didn't understand you. You get upset because you just speak to us in Vietnamese, expecting us to understand and being upset that we didn't understand you. And I'm like, okay, that sounds like me. I don't remember that, but that sounds like something I would probably do. But I had a great childhood growing up in the Midwest, and I've always loved study. That was one of the things that I've always really enjoyed. And I don't know, maybe someday I'll come back to it.
Oh, I have to ask, what would you study?
I've actually been working on preparing to do a PhD in math. So math is really my real passion in life. So whenever I have time, I kind of steal away with my books and problem sets and whatever. So yeah, someday, but I don't know. Startups are all consuming right now.
Yeah. Growing up, you studied in university and so forth, and then you started going to more on the engineering side. Could you share a little bit more about how you chose this major?
Yeah, so I applied to University of Illinois, Aerospace Engineering, that's what I did. And then within the first day of orientation, they tell you, look to your left, to your right. Only one of you will be left by the time you graduate. And I thought, oh man, those guys are gone. I'm going to stick with it. And of course, within 2 weeks, I decided, wait, I don't think this is for me. I'm like, okay, I'm going to be designing landing gear for the rest of my life. Forget it, not doing that. And so I go ahead and take my math and science stuff. And I decided I really like art. So I actually transferred from the College of Engineering to the College of Fine Arts. I don't know if too many people have done that. And so I wanted to be a sculptor for a while.
Wow.
And then my roommate, who was very wise, because if he would have told me, it's a useless degree, never going to get a job. Of course, if he said that, he knew that I would ignore it. And so he was much smarter than that. He said, real artists don't need degrees to do art. And I'm like, oh, that's a good point. And anyway, so I realized what I really enjoyed all along was math. So I became a math major and really did fall in love with that. That's what I did for a while. And then, school has always been a big part of life. I ended up studying abroad. And then while I was studying abroad, I learned about languages and linguistics. And I ended up last minute applying to both linguistics and math PhD programs, which basically means I didn't know what I was doing. Because usually by the time you apply for a program like that serious, you should probably know which one to go after. And then also, very characteristic of me, last minute, I kind of decided to do linguistics. So that's why my PhD was in linguistics at MIT. And it was mainly because I had a chance to study with Noam Chomsky, who was kind of a hero. So that was it.
Amazing. So I have to ask, I mean, a lot of people kind of say like, oh, mathematics and linguistics is left
Yeah.
brain, right brain, they're totally separate domains. For you, it felt very natural. Could you share about how that intersection worked for you?
Yeah, art, math, languages, I felt like it's all kind of one mishmash, and it's just things that I like to do. I like images, I like pictures, I like numbers. I think most importantly, I like beauty. I feel that in math, I get to peer into creation and see beauty in its most pure form. Things that I feel like if I'm able to prove them, they were true before I was alive and will be true long after I'm dead. So I think it's one of the coolest things that you could do.
You shared that Noam Chomsky was a role model and hero for you. Could you share more about how you got to know him and what he was like in person?
Yeah, no, Noam was great. First of all, he was just an incredibly kind advisor for someone that kind of well known and had that kind of demand on his time, not just in linguistics, actually, mostly outside of linguistics. People were wanting his time, but he was too busy for his students. So we always had a chance to being able to meet with him was not very hard. I mean, he had a book ahead of time and stuff. But yeah, he just knew a lot. I mean, he would say pretty controversial things in every domain, in linguistics, philosophy, whatever. And you just think, oh my goodness, how are you going to defend that position? And then he does it. He has knowledge, the references. And so I always felt like I had to think twice. And debating with him was just brutal. I mean, I don't think I ever cried, but anyways, he's an incredible teacher. And I think he's often misunderstood. He's very misunderstood. Let me just say that, especially when he talks about AI, his positions about it and whatnot. His positions evolved over time, but yeah, I think he can be easily misunderstood.
I'm so curious because obviously you worked with him, studied under him, obviously seen him evolve over the years. How do you think that he's misunderstood?
Well, I'll just say one thing. When people ask, "What do you think about AI?" and I asked them that because I wanted to work on so I was doing my computational linguistics stuff on the side, almost secretly, even because most of the work at MIT Linguistics was very theoretical in nature. And I really think the difference is that the generative linguistics enterprise, analytic philosophy, a lot of that stuff is really trying to plumb the depths of the mind and trying to understand how our mind works. What are the mental models that exist, that kind of thing. Whereas AI, I think to many people, it's really just an engineering kind of challenge. I mean, there are philosophical questions, obviously, but I feel like people are trying to do different things. One's trying to understand the mind and the other's trying to build useful stuff. And those are just really different enterprises.
Yeah, really interesting. And like you said, was doing something on the side, which is computational linguistics. And you went off to do that twice, right? Once as a researcher at Microsoft, eventually as a CTO and founder of Firespout. Can you share about how that all came together?
Yeah, so I was pulled in as a subject matter expert or whatever for a business plan competition. So at MIT, there's a general encouragement to do that. At the time, there was a competition called the MIT 50K. And the idea is you win. Well, you didn't actually win 50K. It was more like 30K. And then 50K was the total amount of prizes. But anyways, that someone was doing a natural language processing project. And they wanted an expert. They thought somehow I was one. Silly them. But I was like, sure, I'll help out. And then I watched how a business plan was formed and written and defended, how the kind of questions that judges ask, what investors ask. I thought, wow, that's fascinating. I'm like, wait a second, I can do that. So the next year, I decided to give it a shot and wrote my own business plan. And I didn't end up winning, but we did get funded. So I guess that counts for something. And that was for Firespout, machine learning assisted natural language processing. But I'll have to say, this was back when NLP didn't really work that well. So the demos were cool, but in terms of being able to make a really useful product, that was much more difficult.
And what's interesting is that actually my second startup actually went through MIT 100K.
So right on. Okay.
we didn't win. We were one of the folks that still got supported by MIT.
Nice.
So it happened like dozens of years after you went through the experience at a 50K.
Yeah, this was in the
mark.
mid 90s, man. This was like 97, so it's a long time ago.
It's like inflation. So it's just doubled
I
the
know.
size price pool. I
Yeah,
guess.
now there's like multiple 100Ks.
Yeah, exactly. And so what's there is that you decided to become entrepreneurial. Was that something that you felt like was a no-brainer? Was it something that you had to be much more intentional about?
I wish I could say I was intentional about it. And I wish I could say I was intentional at any point in life, but that's just not true. I've just generally pursued things that I've enjoyed doing. And that's what I did. I thought, wow, this sounds fun, but it's a different part of the brain. It's not just abstract thinking and theorizing, which is fun. I love doing that kind of stuff. Love learning languages, love doing math, love solving problems. But this is another kind of problem because there was a deeply human dimension to this. And so I did it just because I found it a clean thing to do. Someone had already created kind of a template for me to do it. So that's what I did. And so Firespout was just an incredible learning experience. It was a failure. We barely made any money, enough to, pay for rent for a couple of years, but that's about it. But boy, did we learn a lot.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that you went off after selling to Ask Jeeves in
Mhm.
2001. You went on
Yep.
to become a founder again, right? So at
Yes. So I
Metrics.
was, I was trying to, actually at that time, I'd gone back to try to finish my PhD. Asian mom always saying, "Hey, when are you going to finish your degree?" "I'm getting to it, mom. I'm getting to it." And then shortly after going back into my program, my partner Sridhar pulls me out and said, "Oh, no, you don't. We're going to do this again." Because I had pulled him into doing my first startup. And then, all right, fine. So we do our second startup, which is called Argomatrix, which was doing electrochemical biosensors. And so just in general, I mean, there's a general theme of where I'm just a sucker for, I guess people call it deep tech these days, which is Silicon Valley parlance for science-based technology or some sort of technology based on some sort of breakthrough. So scientific or engineering breakthrough. And so we did. That was Argomatrix, and just the two of us in our apartments built a blood glucose sensing company for the diabetes space. And yeah, that was a good run. We did that for about 10 years, built it from nothing to, I think at the peak, we had over 90 million revenue. And then anyways, we eventually sold it, did a deal with Apple and then Sanofi and whatnot, and ended up selling the company. And then, yeah, the rest is history. We've done a number of these things together now.
Yeah, amazing. And after that, you went off to build Misfit Wearables right
That's right.
after. So back to
Yeah,
back, keep going.
Yeah. So at that time, we had a CEO in place for Argomatrix, and I'd been there 10 years. So I was like, okay, ready to go. And so I left and started, and actually I left because I was on a vacation. At the time I was with my wife in Israel to actually show there to teach. And so I accompanied her, and I was just going to take time off. But then one thing led to another, a series of weird coincidences and providential events that basically led me to start Misfit. And yeah, and so I pulled in Sridhar, and then at the time I had become friends with John Sculley, the former CEO of Apple, kind of a weird friendship. But the three of us banded together and started Misfit. So, I mean, they were non-operating founders. They were on the board. So I was the sole operating founder for the business. But it was, well, that was, I don't know, for me, a historic time. It was actually, we founded the company on October 5th, which was the day that Steve Jobs died. And we kind of named the company Misfit, kind of as a tribute to him, one of the great misfits of all time, right? And what a cool name for a company that was about fitness technology and about wearable stuff that should fit, right? So we had a good time just getting started, but boy, I didn't know what we were getting ourselves into, because when we started, there were 20 companies that were competitors. And by the time we got our first product out to market, there were 70 competitors. Oh my goodness. I'm like, wow, I don't know if that was in, but the funny thing is, though, is in retrospect, it was actually amazing timing, because it was during a hype cycle. And honestly, we just had to be better than the other folks, because everyone was interested in a wearable technology of some sort.
Yeah, I remember actually looking at Misfit. I ended up buying the Jawbone Up 24, which turned out to be a little simpler from my perspective, but it turned out to be not so reliable, unfortunately. Definitely broke down. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we had several pretty tough competitors out there: Fitbit, Jawbone, at the time, Nike Fuel Band, if you remember them, and Y Things. So 4 really tough competitors and dozens of copycats. And then we were kind of like the 5th, somewhat original, I would say. And so we quickly became 3rd or 4th in the market in a short period of time. And it was primarily because I think we just found a really awesome market for it. I mean, the product wasn't like this amazing product. In some levels, it was actually a very basic product, but there was a market that wanted a basic product. So that's what we went after.
Yeah, I thought it was a very interesting time. And I remember going to the Quantified Self meetups, and everybody would be comparing their various devices.
That's right.
That was the
Well,
time.
that's funny,
yeah.
because, and I talked to the Quantified Self folks, and I'll tell you this, Jeremy, we cheated. You know what we did?
What?
Was I went to Amazon.com and read the reviews for Jawbone, Fitbit, Y Things, all of those guys, right? And I remember Fitbit, it was like 169 pages. I still remember, how you click through the bottom, like 1, 2, 3, dot, dot, dot. It goes up to 168, 169. I read every single review for them. Jawbone had like 53 or something pages with, I think in total, we read about 5,000 reviews. It was a heck of a lot of reviews. But I read up and I kind of learned what people loved and hated. And I still remember it was like, it had to be comfortable. They hated charging. They hated products because it didn't look good. They couldn't make sense of the data, and just reliability. And so I said, okay, if we can nail 2 out of those 5, 3 out of those 5, then I think we're good. And in fact, however many we nail, let's just focus on 1 of the 5 that we nail, and then go to town. And so that's what we did, because the basic question that we asked ourselves was, why is it that why do people buy wearables? And you ask people, they say, Well, and the vast majority said, oh, because I want to live longer or live a healthier life, which didn't make sense to me as an answer, to be honest. Like, I just didn't believe it because I said, if you are really serious about getting healthier, you just eat less, you know? Like, why do you need to spend $100 to tell you for a product that you might not use to tell you that you're not moving enough? You already know that. So I thought there must be another reason. And then as I thought about it more, talked to more people, my hypothesis was, I think there's like 3 kind of concentric rings of types of people who are buying these things. You've got people, marathon runners, active, regular working out people, and then there's the elite athletes, regular working out people. But one ring out would be people who want to work out and want to be active.
Yeah.
Okay. But I thought there's got to be something else missing here. So I thought, wait a second. As I talked to more people, I realized there's a third ring, which is people who want to look like they are healthy, but don't really want to work out. Because I don't think anyone really wants to just work out. If you had your way and you could get the benefits of working out without actually working out, I think the vast majority of people would prefer to just not work out. And so I'm like, okay, let's go after that group because that is probably the largest group out there. And so that's what we did. So we went after folks so we never talked about, heart rate. We never talked about data. We never talked about the megahertz and gigabits. And we no technology, no fitness. Okay. We never talked about any of that. We just had interesting people doing really interesting things and looking great doing it. Because that's, I think, what people wanted. And so we said, okay, let's go for that. And if we can actually encourage those people to actually work out or to change their mindset about health, then we win from a missional perspective. And I think we win from a business perspective as well. So that was what Misfit was about, was going after that segment, that actually just that outer ring of customers.
Yeah, I definitely agree that Misfit had the style points for sure.
Yeah, that was the focus.
Jawbone Up 24 and Fitbit even for a good long time.
Jawbone it was beautiful and a bold design. I have to give them that. But we had one test, which was cool. So I would pull out our product first to people and say, would you wear this? And often people would say, well, what is it? I'm like, just the thing, this little silver disc. Oh, yeah, I'd wear it. Okay. Then I pull out the Jawbone Up and I'd say, would you wear this? And they say, well, what is that? And I'm like, nothing. It's just a thing. They're like, no, why would I wear that? And then I pull out the other competitors and I said, would you wear this? And they're like, well, why? And what is it? And I'm like, nothing. It's just, no. Meaning, so I was basically asking, would you wear any of these as jewelry? Answer was no. And for us, a lot of times the answer was also no. But it was like 30% of the time people say, yeah, I'd wear it. And then they say, well, what does it do? And I was like, it doesn't do anything. And then I was like, okay, I think we're on something here because it did actually do something. Exactly. Though we did find out later that a fair number of people, probably, I don't know, we estimated 8, 9, 10% based on usage patterns and sales data, that around 8 to 10% never used the battery on the product.
What? It's just always, just
wore it. They just wore it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, this bonkers.
It's like, it shocked me that any number above 0, right? You'd think it would be 0. It wasn't. It was like 8 or 9. It wasn't like a huge number, but it was like 10-ish%.
That's a good chunk. That's a huge customer persona right there. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's who we went after.
And I remember reading news back then, right, that it was acquired by Fossil for $260 million. That was a huge exit. I think go like, wow, huge dynamic there. And then you worked at Fossil for a couple of years after that and grew the business to over $300 million annually for Fossil Group. Share a little bit more about that whole experience.
Oh my goodness. I will just say in summary, it was more providence than being good. Okay. I think a lot of people talk about how, we did all this stuff and then it just happened. Translation, that was awesome, right? Let's be very clear. There was no awesomeness involved. It was pure providence. It was just given to us. And you look back, the timing was impeccable. It was really good timing. I think we did serve a market need. That's one. And we found really a perfect partner. Our acquirer was someone who cared about that segment, who has always been in the fashion industry and was a world leader in fashion wearables. And so fashion watches and wanted to have a larger presence in the wearable space. So we were incredibly fortunate to have them, just to be matched with them. So we're just so grateful for that opportunity. It was a fabulous exit. It was, from when we first funding was in April 2000, Founders Fund backed us and they just, we love those guys. And Khosla, the two of them co-led our Series A. And then to the time we sold, it was, I think, like 42 months or something like that, which is insane for a hardware company. But I think it's a testament to the timing of the market.
Yeah. I think it was great timing because the competitors that you mentioned, Jam went one way, Fitbit has gone public, but I think it's gone his own set of issues that they have there. So,
after Fitbit, we were the second largest wearables exit in history. So I think case. Maybe that's not the case anymore. That was a long time ago. That was in 2015. But it was, we had a different story. One was about fitness and technology. Ours was about fitness and design and fashion.
It's a great way to do it.
And that's what we leaned into. But yeah, it was a great time in 2 years at Fossil, and I didn't know what they needed a CTO there for, but I was happy to do whatever it was to support their mission. So it was a good learning experience for me. I never really had a job. I mean, I kind of worked at Microsoft, but yeah, I don't know. Those were internships and kind of short stints, And so this was my first like real job. It was great showing up to work, having a boss and stuff. Kind of liked it.
And then you went on to keep going, right? So you worked at Impact Biosystems.
Yeah.
And
So
several
that's
other
right. So
startups along the way.
so after the Fossil thing, we started Alabaster, which is our family office, invested in a bunch of companies. And then during that time also I helped Sridhar start, we started our fourth company together, which was Elemental Machines, which does IoT for basically helping to automate science. And so initially the positioning was that we would be doing lab ops, analytics, and monitoring for lab operations. And the vision has grown substantially from that since. And the company's doing great. I mean, I was a non-operating founder there, just as Sridhar was a non-operating founder for me at Misfit. And he's just done an amazing job growing a business that is now, I think it's profitable. It's Series B funded. And honestly, I had very little to do with their success. I was just an early helper. Yeah. So after that, never really stopped doing startups. And yeah, that's right. We did Impact Biosystems, which is a muscle sensing technology. And that's been acquired as well. Technology out of MIT, out of Ian Hunter's lab. That was a lot of fun. And then I tried my hand at operating a couple of companies. So I was an early involvement at Harrison.ai, which is a medical AI company that analyzes medical images, chest x-rays, CT scans, that kind of thing. And then Arrivo, which does 3D printing of carbon fiber. So yeah, founder, investor, operator. And I think my natural kind of place in life is probably to be a founder, that or in academics. We'll find out.
And over this grand arc of multiple entrepreneurship, both success and failure, what have been some lessons that you've had over time? Perhaps, for example, what the CEO has been good at, especially since you've done that role quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to give this talk that was entitled The 9 Lessons Learned from Failure. And the theme around that, the basic idea is that I think failure is the best teacher, success a terrible teacher, right? And with each startup, and with each, not just my own, but other people's startups, I feel like I've learned there's like 2 awesome things you get from it. One is you learn something, usually. And 2 is you have awesome people that you run into that if you're lucky enough, you get to take them with you. If you were lucky enough and treated them well enough, and you get to take them with you along the way, they become your crew. So I feel like I have a small crew now that I'm very grateful for. And then after the recent couple of operating positions, I feel like my 9 lessons learned from failure is now more like 11 lessons from failure. And I feel like you just think like, wow, have I learned everything? And absolutely not. I mean, hopefully you don't make the same mistakes, but you definitely make new ones all the time. But I want to say that whether it was hiring, setting up the environment, commercial development, go to market, there's just a lot of things to learn in doing a startup, how to pitch, how to raise money. I've raised a lot of money, 22 venture rounds when I think about it over the 25 years. Bunch of seed, Series A, Series D, a bunch of Series C rounds. And I would just say this. When people say you're a serial entrepreneur, I almost never really know what to say about that because Mark Zuckerberg's not a serial entrepreneur, right? Like he made it. I'm a serial entrepreneur because I haven't made it yet. We're still making it. And I would just say that if there was one recurring theme that comes back time and again, what is the most important role? What is the role that I feel like I keep having to do time and time again, whether I like it or not? What is the role that my founder friends find themselves having to do time and time again? I'd say it's sales. Sales is it, man. It's not just sell me this pencil. That's a very kind of a vulgar oversimplification of a very noble role, a noble task. And that task involves convincing people to come work with you when they really shouldn't, because you're going to pay them maybe half, give them no job security, and that's it. You got to convince the media to write about you when there's like nothing to write about because all you have are ideas and paper, or getting partners to work with you, big companies to give you money or do something with you when honestly they probably shouldn't take the risk of doing that because you might not be around for another 6 months. In 6 months' time, trying to get investors to invest in you when it's exceptionally risky, no matter how much, reality distortion or song and dance you put on, it's freaking risky. What you're doing. There's commercial risk, there's timing risk, there's engineering risk, who knows? And then there's the risk of, you're trying to convince, obviously, customers to buy your product if you have one, or even buy your product when you don't have one. So this job of having to convince people to do stuff, it kind of in all rational thought, they probably should not. this is something you have to do time and time again. And it's not just the role of a founder. It could be whether you're a manager at an organization or a team leader in an MBA program. You're constantly trying to get people to do something that they might not normally do. And hopefully it is something that's actually good for them, because if it is good for them, it turns out to be great for them, then you get your crew.
Amazing. Talk about what the crew is like.
Oh, goodness. Like over the time, I'll just tell you some of my favorite crew people. Okay, I won't mention names because we'll embarrass them, but I'll just say the recurring themes for an awesome crew person. Okay, let's say crewmen, but there are women as well in my life journey. Obviously, awesome skills is really important. They got to be good at something. Okay, whether it's engineering, design, or something, but generally they're good at something. Okay, they have some sort of superpower, and oftentimes in almost every single one of these crew people I can think of, that I'm thinking of right now, they have some sort of weakness, that's for sure, but it's an overcomable weakness. So some sort of superpower, an overcomable weakness, that's on the skills, like stuff you can do side. But I would say the one definitely strong recurring theme is selflessness. Like they are the most awesome people, because they're the people I love working with, because it's never, once they're kind of on board with something. And by the way, the crew isn't automatic. Like I feel like with the crew, I have to convince them, like, by the way, I'm doing this now. Here's why it's awesome. And there are times when they're like, that doesn't sound awesome, man. I'll help you, but it's not awesome. I'm like, okay, maybe I should work on it. And so one is I do have to convince, but once they're really in, and they're about the thing, the mission, not about themselves. I'll give you one example. There's one guy, I won't mention his name. People who know me will know who I'm talking about. He was employee number one at Misfit, and our engineering head became our CTO person there. And I couldn't for the longest time give him a raise. He was making, I won't say it, he was making 80K a year, which is like nothing in Silicon Valley for a head of engineering, CTO. He was employee number one. And he didn't even have that much stock. And so for 3 years, I could not give him a raise, because every time I did, he would just say, oh, give it to my team members. I couldn't give him a bonus. I couldn't even give him stock. Every time I offered him stock, he's like, I don't need stock, man. I live simply and I love what I'm doing. Just give it to my team members. They're the ones who need it. And I mean, who does that? Truly selfless for the mission, not just the mission, but just for others. Man, that is so rare and so precious to have. And I don't know, servant leader, man, those are the best. Servant leader who are really competent. If you have a handful of those people, I think you can do it.
Amazing. And what's interesting in terms of servant leadership is you grew up in Vietnam, you moved to the US, you were speaking Vietnamese to your classmates, and now you're back based in Vietnam as well. And I understand that you've been helping out with the, math Olympiad team, supporting them as well. Yeah. So I was just kind of curious, how did you get about starting to do so? Yeah. What you've learned along the way?
Yeah, look, we've been here in Vietnam for the last 8 years. I'll be here for one more year, moving back to the United States, New England, New Hampshire, 30 minutes north of Boston in August 2024. So I'm looking forward to that. But we're going to make an awesome last push here this last year in Vietnam. And it's been a great time here. We've learned a lot. And one of those things, one of the rare treats, oh my goodness, because I love math, love people who do math, right? People do math, can do no wrong with me, is we have an awesome IMO team. So the International Math Olympiad, IMO, is ostensibly one of the most difficult exams in the world, most difficult mental competitions in the world, at least in terms of an academic subject. I suppose the chess championships are probably really difficult as well. Math competitions, and Vietnam is just really good at it. Every year, I think something like almost 200 companies, a lot of countries participate, but each country sends they're the top 6 to go. And Vietnam has traditionally done really well. And so we're big fans, we're big supporters of the IMO team. We hold a reception for them. And I'm kind of a groupie, to be honest. Like these kids, 16, 17, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids are solving just incredibly difficult problems and making the country proud. For a country whose GDP per capita is, I think it's like an eighth of Switzerland, it outperforms nearly every country in the world. Except for last year, I think we were 7th. The year before that, we were 4th in the world. Crazy. Behind, China, the United States, and Korea, number 4. Unbelievable for a country with a very low GDP per capita. And so always been very proud of the team, the coaches who are involved, the Math Institute who's helped hosting that. They've done just the Ministry of Education, they've just done an amazing job for the resources that they have. So yeah, we're big fans. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I'm kind of a fanboy because I never had really a chance to do that myself. I always wish I did.
It's so wholesome. I was just kind of curious that from a personal perspective, have there been any times that you've personally been brave?
Been brave? Oh, yeah. Well, I'll tell you 2 quick stories. There was a time when I was physically brave. A group of friends and I were in Turkey. He is you study abroad in Israel. Thing you do is you go to Greece and Turkey. So that's what we did during the high holidays. So we went to Turkey, and my friend saw a cliff and thought we're in the middle of nowhere, Pergamum, like Ephesus area, decides to climb it. And of course, he gets stuck. And then it's a seriously scary cliff that he's trying to climb up without ropes or equipment. He thought it'd be interesting to climb. Bad idea. Anyway, so there's another road he can go up. And the short story is that there was a moment where I had to decide, am I going to risk my life to try to save my friend or not? And in that moment, I actually decided, you know what? I may just die doing this, but I'm just going to do it. And just as I decided to do that and started moving towards taking steps to fish him out with the strap on my bag, there was a Turkish guy came bouncing down and pulled him up. So I didn't actually have to rescue him. But that was pretty scary. And I am no hero. Let's be very clear. But boy, that was a moment of intense fear, I have to say. So a second story that might be more relevant to the audience here is for my second company. We're doing that blood glucose sensing company, and we're almost out of money, and we finally get a term sheet. Just wow, we finally get a term sheet. This was in 2, and boy, we were like, finally, we're going to have money. These investors, I mean, well-intentioned, honestly, they're just doing their jobs, but they basically were trying to get us to screw our previous investors and cut a deal that where we would actually end up with a lower valuation, but with top-ups and whatnot, we would actually have more ownership in the company, and they would have as well, but the previous investors would have substantially less. And now, of course, the existing investors could have just like not signed off on it, but they knew we were running out of cash, so they had to sign off on it. And the new investors knew that. And in that moment, I think Shreed and I looked at each other and we said, "Oh, are we going to really do this or not?" We thought, no, I don't think we're going to be able to sleep with ourselves if we did this. So we decided no. And even the existing investors said, "You can go ahead and do it. It's fine. We know what's going on. Enjoy the equity, but just keep the company alive." And we said, "No, we're not going to do this." So we declined it. And then we almost run out of cash because we end up using our credit cards, personal credit cards, to pay payroll for actually 2 months. And then we finally got a replacement term sheet that didn't have those conditions and finally get the company funded. Boy, that was a close one. But that was definitely one of those hard decisions because it's kind of morally grave, but it also was a matter of conscience and trying to live beyond reproach. And I don't know, it was hard. We're in our 20s. We didn't know anything. We're just kids. But I think we knew what was right and what was wrong.
You know, for both stories, I think you mentioned some element of fear and confusion. How did you go about, I mean, obviously there are very different types as well, right? One's more physical and one's more on from a considered startup perspective. But I'm just kind of curious, how did you go about thinking or feeling and navigating through these issues? Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, it was about, I mean, when it's in the moment, you are acting instinctively. I mean, certainly by that cliff, I was on my own. And me and God, right? In the moment of startup financing, it was me and Sridhar, and then us discussing how are we going to, we're young, we're early, if this startup fails, we'll be other things to do. How's life going to be if we knew we did something that we were not proud of? And so in the end, it didn't really affect the final outcome all that much. But having the longer perspective of just thinking, how will we be in the future? How will we think of ourselves in the future? That helped kind of guide us to the decisions that we eventually made.
Any reflections on what bravery means or how to go about it?
Well, you can't really be brave or courageous unless you're afraid. So I think the first step is if you're not afraid, then, I don't know, maybe if you're not afraid, then you're brave. But I think to have courage, you really have to be afraid of something. Because otherwise, that's just carelessness or just not thinking about stuff.
Yeah. On that note, thank you so much for sharing. I'd love to summarize the 3 big takeaways I got from this. First of all, thank you so much for sharing about what you were like growing up as a Vietnamese newcomer, speaking Vietnamese to your American classmates, but also talking about life being a sidekick and also what you've learned along the way in terms of how you chose your major, how you decided to do both mathematics and linguistics, and what was it like to learn from Noam Chomsky and hear and decide about different aspects and how to some extent that came together as computational linguistics, which kicked off your first job at Microsoft. So really interesting early exploration of who you are as a person. Secondly, thank you so much for sharing about your entrepreneurship journey, especially with a big chunk obviously around the wearables, but also the other companies you built along the way and what you learned along the way in terms of how to navigate financing, tough decisions that you had to make along the way. And also I think that dive into wearables about how you went to over 5,000 reviews across multiple competitors to understand what they were. And I really thought it was fascinating to hear about how you went about to benchmark them, but also to think through, like you said, those concentric circles of why people would wear a wearable. I thought that was a very fascinating study of not only product market fit, but also having the iteration and learning process. Lastly, thank you so much for sharing about your own personal story of courage. Obviously, you shared about the experience about helping your friend during a tough time and that decision that you had to make, even though you didn't have to follow through the action, but you made an intentional choice. But secondly, of course, talking about how you had to think through fundraising and that set of decisions. Now, of course, not just that, but I think you showed multiple times along the way of bravery in terms of like choosing to build a startup the first time around, choosing to build it again. So Sonny, thank you so much for sharing your journey.
It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me, Jeremy.
Thank you for listening to Brave. If you enjoyed this episode, please share the podcast with your friends and colleagues. We would also appreciate you leaving a rating or review. Head over to www.bravesea.com for member content, resources, and community. Stay well and stay brave.